those people who staged this Duma deception are the people who these so-called diplomats in Washington and London are now protecting, because the evidence that everyone can see is overwhelming that this Duma thing was staged. Even if we didn't have the OPCW leaks, the actual investigators who went to Syria and wrote a report and had it censored and kept from the public, even if we didn't have that, you can make a case just from the open source evidence, and starting with the plausibility of the Syrian government as it's about to retake a town, a battle it's almost won, all of a sudden deploying chemical weapons, thereby doing the one thing that it knows will trigger US military strikes, as Trump had promised and did over another fake allegation the year before. So even without the OPCW leaks, you have a scandal, but with the OPCW leaks, you have a global scandal, because now this top chemical watchdog is being exploited to wage warfare on Syria, to justify the military strikes that follow the Duma deception, to justify the ongoing sanctions. And by the way, it's so extreme that they're not just exploiting the OPCW for that one Duma incident. The OPCW won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 because after the alleged Ghouta attack in 2013, Russia brokered a deal where Syria would give up all of its chemical weapons stockpile. And of course, investigative reporting from Seymour Hersh later showed that Ghouta was staged by the insurgents as well, who had gotten sarin from Turkey, that the sarin found in Ghouta did not match the sarin in the Syrian government stockpile. This was confirmed by the British government military lab, that James Clapper went to Barack Obama and said this intelligence is not a slam dunk, a deliberate reference to what George Tenet said about Iraq. So we know that Ghouta was staged as well, but regardless, in response to it, the allegation, Syria went into the Chemical Weapons Convention, which was a huge achievement for the world. But look what happened to it. The OPCW was then used Syria's ascension to continue to wage warfare on it. So we see that with the Duma case where they falsely accuse it of being guilty. And now with every single incident, they always release a report that in a sneaky way blames Syria, even if the evidence is completely controlled by the white helmets, as was the case with Sarakib, a recent report where all samples came from the White Helmets, which is an organization, a propaganda organization funded by the same belligerents waging war on Syria. And the OPCW, in violation of its own stated policies, is relying on these so-called samples. So we've seen this beautiful achievement for the world and global peace, Syria giving up its chemical weapons arsenal, being used to wage a new way of warfare against Syria. And the Duma deception exposes the lies that have been used to do all this and the deceit. And so what are these governments doing? Well, yesterday at the UN, there was an extraordinary session, which I'll cover soon on Pushback, where Fernando Arias, the OPCW chief, he appeared and he gave his most extensive comments on Duma to date. He attacked the inspectors. He lied about them. He said that Inspector B played a role in the investigation, when in reality, Inspector B wrote the original report and was the mission's chief scientific coordinator. He also said that the other inspector, Ian Henderson, was not even a member of the fact-finding mission. We know from the OPCW's own documents that we published at the Gray Zone that that's false. But regardless, all these attacks are done to avoid talking about the actual facts, the real issue, which is the documented scientific fraud that occurred and the refusal by the OPCW to investigate it. So in the process, Arias told some new lies yesterday. He actually stole a talking point from me and put it in reverse. When I spoke at the UN Security Council a few weeks ago or a month ago, I debunked this notion that they put out, which is that after the original inspectors were sidelined, that somehow after that, all of the real sampling and analysis was conducted, that the majority of the work was done. I showed that to be false simply by comparing what's in the original interim report and the final report. And it shows that, for example, 70% of the samples were analyzed by the original team. Just 30% were sampled after they were gone. And if you look at them all individually, they show nothing new of significance that can bring you to a conclusion.
Almost no new work was done in the official report.
Yes, exactly. So Arias took the figure of 70% of being done by the original team, and he appropriated. He said yesterday that he's talked about 70 samples, new samples out of 100 being analyzed after the team was sidelined. So, which is false. So they're actually telling egregious lies, and we'll have more on Pushback soon and more at the Gray Zone. I'll write about it. But That's a state of desperation. And you saw, when he's been given a simple proposal, will you meet with the dissenting inspectors, and will you let the OPCW's own scientific advisory board, not Russia's scientists or China's scientists or South Africa's scientists, but the OPCW's own scientific advisory board, will you let them adjudicate this dispute, meet with the inspectors and weigh the evidence that was suppressed? And he said that that's out of his hands. He can't do that. That's against the rules. And he also said that he's not going to reopen the Duma case because it's closed. That's what he said. And he's backed up in his denialism by all these Western diplomats who, yes, took shots at me and others and saying that we're all Assad supporters. And that's all that they can do because they are desperate to avoid talking about the facts, which are just so overwhelming and damning.
So the saga continues. I mean, they're just going to, they didn't expect themselves to be at this point. They didn't expect there to be dissidents emerging from their own ranks. They didn't expect the founding director of the OPCW to be taking their side. They didn't expect international celebrities from Roger Waters to Susan Sarandon and famed journalists like John Pilger to take up this cause. But Aaron is really, I think you've been really providing the platform for all of this to take place. And we have some really good questions for especially